World Tea Expo was once the center of gravity for the specialty tea trade in North America. It was where retailers came to discover new origins, where importers built sourcing relationships, and where producers told the story behind the leaf. For nearly 2 decades, it functioned as a category-defining marketplace, not just a trade show, but a signal of where the specialty tea industry was headed. In 2026, that center shifted. The show floor is busier. That's the first thing you notice from the ribbon-cutting rush to the blaring music. Foot traffic is strong, consistent, and on the surface encouraging, but you look a little closer and the composition of that audience tells a different story. This is no longer a tea-first audience. It's a food service-driven audience. Bars, cafes, restaurant operators moving through the same aisles as tea suppliers, and that changes everything. This year, World Tea Expo is no longer operating as a standalone event. It is embedded within a much larger commercial environment, co-located with the Bar and Restaurant Expo, which is celebrating its 40th edition. That decision has delivered what organizers wanted: more people, more movement, more exposure. At its height, World Tea Expo attracted 3,500 attendees. The Bar and Restaurant Expo routinely attracts 35,000. But exposure is not the same as alignment. For some exhibitors, the shift is working. Matcha and Japanese tea suppliers in particular are seeing real traction. Their booths are active, sampling is constant, conversations are commercial, and this is not accidental. Japanese participation this year is highly visible and highly coordinated. Government-backed export programs, particularly out of Shizuoka, have underwritten pavilion space, enabling smaller producers to access the U.S. market at scale. This is strategic, and it reflects a larger truth. North America has become the primary growth engine for Japan's green tea exports. But walk a few steps further down the aisle and the story changes. Exhibitors focused on single-origin loose-leaf tea, specialty retail, high-end sourcing, they're asking a different question. Who exactly am I here to meet? Because the traditional buyer, the independent tea retailer, the specialty importer, the high-touch shop owner, is no longer the dominant presence on the floor. Instead, the dominant buyer is looking for beverages at scale, products that integrate into menus, and formats that move quickly. And that's not the same market. There were also notable absences. In previous years, the board-sponsored pavilions from Sri Lanka, India, and East Africa played a central role, anchoring origin representation and reinforcing the global supply chain. ITI, an anchor with the largest booth for years, folded last year. This year, those pavilions were absent, and so were stalwarts Rishi Tea, Seven Cups, and Tea Spot. There were no tea bar clusters of retail fans surrounding the specialty retail pioneers like Austin Hodge, Frank Miller, Roy Fong, Eva Lee. We will never again see a Bill Waddington, Devon Shaw, John Harney, and Stash co-founder Stephen Smith. In their place, a heavier concentration of commercial beverage brands and formats. Even Lipton, historically absent from this environment, made an appearance, targeting food service channels with ready-to-deploy offerings. That's not a small signal. That's a structural one. So what does the show look like today? It looks like a beverage show where tea is one category and many non-alcoholic offerings. And this year, within that category, one product dominated: matcha. Matcha was everywhere. It's driving traffic, it's driving sampling, it's driving conversations, but it's also reshaping expectations because much of the demand we're seeing is not rooted in traditional tea culture. It's rooted in modern beverage formats: matcha lattes, iced drinks, smoothies, dessert applications, and confectionery. This is tea as an ingredient, tea as a platform, and tea as a functional input in a broader beverage system. And that raises an important question for the industry. If demand is being driven by format, not origin, what happens to the value chain? Because specialty tea as it was built depends on origin differentiation, processing complexity, storytelling, and tea education. Those are not the primary drivers in a food service environment. It's speed, consistency, and margin. Now, to be clear, this is not a failing show. From a commercial standpoint, it may be the most successful show ever. Traffic's up, engagement is strong, new categories are entering, but success depends on your market position. The U.S. is now Japan's #1 export market for tea by value, with volume approaching 6,000 metric tons. Revenue last year was 40 million yen, about 270 million U.S. If you're selling matcha, ready-to-drink concepts, or functional beverage ingredients, this is a premier global expansion market. Tea shops are an afterthought. Matcha is now a top 3 non-coffee beverage globally in cafes. The World Coffee Portal reports, quote, global matcha beverage sales in coffee shops are now estimated at 3 to 8 billion annually, end quote. If you're selling high-end oolong, rare white teas, or estate-driven black teas, this may feel like displacement. One of the most telling conversations at the show came not from a large exhibitor, but from a startup. A new entrepreneur early in the journey, walking the floor not to sell but to understand. Pat Ahern, a former Major League pitcher who launched Inside Corner Tea, described the expo as a place, quote, to get a feel for the industry, to see where the opportunities and problems are, end quote. That instinct is right, because what this show now represents is not just a marketplace, it's a diagnostic tool. It shows you where demand is moving and where it is not. There is still innovation here. You see it in new brewing technologies, in experimental formats like sparkling tea, in cross-category products that blur the line between tea and wellness. But innovation in specialty tea is no longer leading the show. It's demand. And that brings us to the central question. When a trade show grows by changing its audience, does it also change its purpose? For 20 years, World Tea Expo has helped define the specialty tea category. It created a space where tea stood on its own, where quality mattered, origin mattered, and where leaf, not format, was the focus. In 2026, tea does not define the room. It competes within it. And that may be the most important signal of all, because it suggests that the industry itself is entering a new phase, one where tea is no longer insulated as a specialty category, but integrated into a much larger, more competitive beverage ecosystem. For some, that's growth. For others, it's dilution. For everyone, it's a shift that requires attention. The question is no longer whether the market is changing. Since the pandemic, it already has. The question is whether the industry will adapt, or whether it will continue to build for a market that no longer exists in quite the same way.
Produced by Adavita Studios. Connect your voice to the world.